That seat is not for you. Meredith Collins said it loudly enough for the entire first-class cabin to hear, her voice cutting through the low hum of boarding like a blade against glass. She stood beside seat 1A with one hand resting on the headrest, guarding it as though she had personally purchased the row. Jonathan Reed stopped in the aisle, a valid boarding pass held between two fingers. The ticket showed his name, the flight number, and seat 1A in clean black letters. Nothing about it was unclear. Meredith looked at the ticket, then at Jonathan, and somehow decided his face was the mistake. First class is full, she added. You need to keep moving. Jonathan did not. He was 46, broad-shouldered, calm, and dressed in a navy jacket over an open-collar shirt with dark slacks. No assistant followed him. No security detail waited nearby. He wore no visible symbol of wealth. Only the quiet confidence of a man who had spent 20 years entering rooms where people assumed he did not belong. Around them, passengers slowed their movements. A businessman paused while placing his briefcase overhead. A couple across the aisle stopped whispering. At the front galley, lead flight attendant Karen Wallace turned toward the commotion. Is there a problem? She asked. Meredith answered before Jonathan could speak. He is trying to take a first-class seat. Karen looked at Jonathan with immediate suspicion. Sir, economy is behind the divider. Jonathan raised the boarding pass. My seat is 1A. Karen accepted the ticket, but she barely studied it. Her eyes moved from the paper to his clothes, then back to Meredith. There may have been a seating change. Then scan it, Jonathan said. His voice was low, controlled, and impossible to mistake for aggression. Karen's expression tightened anyway. You need to cooperate while we complete boarding. Jonathan glanced at the empty leather seat behind Meredith. Cooperate with what? Meredith folded her arms. My friend is joining me. She was promised that seat. The airline promised it to me, Jonathan replied. A few passengers looked down, hiding reactions. Karen lifted her tablet and typed quickly. For half a second, the screen reflected in the polished divider. Jonathan saw his name beside 1A, marked confirmed in green. Karen saw it too. Yet instead of acknowledging the record, she angled the screen away. Your reservation is under review, she said. Jonathan studied her face. It was confirmed 5 seconds ago. Meredith let out a short laugh. People like you always think showing a piece of paper means you can demand anything. The cabin changed. The insult was not loud, but it carried the weight of something older than the aircraft, older than the ticket, older than every polished promise printed in the Airline magazine. Jonathan met her eyes. People like me? Meredith's confidence flickered, but Karen stepped between them before she had to answer. Sir, do not escalate this. Jonathan looked at the empty seat, the valid ticket, and the flight attendant who had already chosen which story to believe. I have not raised my voice, he said. I have not touched anyone. I have only asked to sit in the seat I paid for. Karen tapped the tablet again. This time, the green confirmation beside Jonathan's name disappeared. A yellow notice replaced it. Manual crew review. Near the galley, a young flight attendant named Emma Carter stared at her own screen. She had scanned Jonathan's ticket at the gate. It had been valid. It had been clear. And now, while he stood in the aisle, someone had changed the record. Jonathan noticed the alarm in her face before anyone else did. What did you see? He asked. Karen turned sharply toward Emma. Nothing that concerns him. Emma lowered the tablet, but not before Jonathan caught a second line beneath the altered seat status. The same override code had been used earlier that morning to close an unresolved maintenance warning. At that moment, Jonathan understood the truth. This was no longer only about first class. Emma kept her eyes on the tablet, but the color had already left her face. Jonathan saw the same override code twice, once beside his altered seat assignment and once beside a maintenance alert marked resolved without inspection. The connection was too specific to ignore. Karen stepped closer to Emma and lowered her voice. Return to the galley. Emma did not move. The seat was confirmed when he boarded, she said. I scanned it myself. Meredith gave an impatient sigh. She is young. She probably made a mistake. Emma looked at her. I did not. The answer was quiet, but it changed the balance in the cabin. Jonathan turned toward Karen. Restore the original record. Karen held the tablet against her uniform. The crew has discretion to manage seating. Discretion does not mean rewriting a valid ticket after boarding. A man seated across the aisle lowered his newspaper. Miguel Santos had watched the entire exchange from seat to seat, first with discomfort, then with growing disbelief. "He is right," Miguel said. "The screen showed green before you changed it." Karen looked at him sharply. "Sir, please remain out of this. You made it everyone's business when you accused him in front of the cabin." Several passengers nodded. Meredith's expression hardened. "This is becoming a spectacle because he refuses to be reasonable." Jonathan looked at her. "Reasonable would have been moving away from a seat that was never yours. My friend was promised that seat." "By whom?" Meredith glanced at Karen. Karen did not answer. Jonathan noticed the hesitation. It was small, but it carried weight. He looked toward Emma again. "What else did that code change?" Karen stepped between them. "That information is not available to passengers." Jonathan's voice remained level. "Then why is it connected to a maintenance warning?" The cabin fell silent. Emma stared at him, surprised he had seen it. Karen's face tightened. "You misunderstood the screen. Then explain it." "I do not need to explain internal systems to you." Jonathan studied the tablet in her hands. Reed Aerospace Holdings had helped design the leasing platform that tracked every aircraft assigned to this airline. He knew the code structure, the maintenance flags, and the limits placed on crew access. The override Karen had used was not meant to erase a passenger. It was meant to temporarily close operational warnings under restricted circumstances. "That code requires supervisory approval," Jonathan said. "Who authorized it?" Karen blinked. "How would you know that?" "Answer the question." Meredith laughed again, though less confidently now. "He probably searched it online." Jonathan ignored her. Emma moved her thumb across her screen and opened the event history. "The authorization came from Captain Robert Hayes," she said. Karen turned toward her with open anger. "Emma, stop." Emma swallowed but kept reading. "The same code was used at 4:18 this morning to defer a cabin pressure sensor inspection." Miguel leaned forward. "A pressure sensor?" Karen raised her voice just enough to reclaim attention. "There is no safety issue. The aircraft has been cleared for departure." Jonathan looked toward the cockpit door. "Cleared by whom?" "Qualified personnel." "Using the same code that changed my seat?" Karen's answer came too quickly. "The two matters are unrelated." "Then why do they share the same authorization chain?" Meredith stood beside 1A, her confidence beginning to fracture. "This is absurd. He is delaying everyone over a seat." Jonathan turned toward her. "No, you started with the seat. Your crew turned it into evidence." At that moment, the cockpit door opened and Captain Robert Hayes stepped into the cabin. He was 57, composed, and visibly irritated by the delay. "What is the problem?" he asked. Karen pointed toward Jonathan. "This passenger is refusing a reassignment and questioning maintenance procedures." Robert looked at Jonathan without checking the ticket. "Sir, you will need to leave the aircraft." Jonathan held his gaze. "Before I do, tell me why your override code closed an unresolved pressure sensor warning." Robert's expression changed for only a second, but it was enough. Jonathan saw recognition, then calculation. The captain had expected resistance. He had not expected knowledge. Robert Hayes held Jonathan's gaze, but the confidence in his face had become deliberate rather than natural. "Maintenance decisions are made by certified teams," he said. "Passengers do not have access to the full context." Jonathan raised his boarding pass slightly. "You have not looked at my ticket, yet you have already decided I should leave. Now you are asking me to trust a maintenance decision you refuse to explain." Robert turned toward Karen. "Has security been called?" Karen nodded. "The gate supervisor is on the way." Emma looked down at her tablet again. The event history remained open, and each line made the situation harder to dismiss. The cabin pressure sensor warning had first appeared 3 days earlier. It had been deferred once for inspection at the next maintenance stop, then closed before that inspection occurred. A second warning appeared the following evening. The same override code closed it again. This morning, a third alert had been marked resolved by Captain Robert Hayes, even though no technician signature appeared beneath it. Emma drew a careful breath. "Captain, there is no maintenance completion entry." Robert's eyes moved toward her. "That record is delayed. There should still be a technician identification number." "Emma, return to your station." She did not move. Karen stepped closer to her. "You are not authorized to interpret engineering logs." Emma looked at Jonathan, then at the screen. "Neither is cabin crew, but someone used a crew override to close the warning." Miguel folded his newspaper and placed it on his lap. So the same tool used to take his seat was also used to hide a safety alert. Karen's voice sharpened. Nothing has been hidden. Jonathan looked at her. Then show the cabin the completed inspection. Meredith let out an irritated breath. This has gone far enough. We are going to miss our departure slot because one man refuses to accept a different seat. Jonathan turned toward her. You are still talking about the seat because the truth is moving beyond your control. Meredith's face tightened. Do not speak to me that way. You spoke to me before you knew anything about me. Robert stepped between them. That is enough. Sir, you are being removed for interfering with flight operations. Jonathan remained still. Flight operations were compromised before I entered this cabin. Robert looked toward the boarding door, where a gate supervisor had just appeared. Please escort this passenger off the aircraft. The supervisor approached with a professional but uneasy expression. Sir, I need you to come with me. Jonathan did not resist. He simply asked, What violation are you documenting? The supervisor hesitated. Karen answered for him. Non-compliance with crew instructions. Which instruction? Jonathan asked. To surrender a confirmed seat after the record was manually altered, or to stop asking about an unresolved safety warning? The supervisor looked toward Robert. Robert's silence lasted too long. Jonathan felt the cabin watching him, but another cabin from 24 years earlier rose in his memory. He had been 22, carrying a business class ticket he had saved months to purchase. A gate agent looked at his sweatshirt, then at his skin, and told him the pass must have been issued in error. He had stepped aside while another passenger took the seat. Hours later, that flight returned to the gate because a technical warning had been ignored during boarding. The humiliation had stayed with him, but so had the lesson. Bias did not only deny dignity. It distracted people from what mattered. The memory passed, and the present sharpened. Jonathan looked at Robert. You are making the same mistake twice. You are treating the person asking for evidence as the problem, while the actual warning remains untouched. Emma's tablet sounded with a soft notification. She looked down and froze. The pressure sensor alert has reopened, she said. Karen reached for the tablet. Emma stepped back. It says the system could not verify cabin pressure calibration. Robert's expression hardened. That can happen during boarding. Jonathan's eyes moved toward the cockpit door. Then the aircraft should not leave the gate until it is inspected. Meredith shook her head. He is not an engineer. Jonathan looked at her, calm and certain. No, I am the man who knows exactly which company built the system you are trying to ignore. The words settled over the cabin with the weight of a door closing. Robert stared at Jonathan, searching his face for recognition, while Karen looked toward the reopened warning on Emma's tablet. Meredith gave a dismissive laugh, but it sounded thinner now. Built the system, she said. Anyone can make claims when they are trying to avoid leaving. Jonathan kept his attention on Robert. The pressure calibration module was developed by Reed Aerospace Systems. The alert sequence on that screen is not a routine boarding fluctuation. It means the sensor cannot confirm a stable reading. Robert folded his arms. You still have not established any authority here. Authority does not change the data. Emma stepped closer to Jonathan and angled the tablet so he could see the full alert history. 3 warnings. 3 closures. No technician signature. The same supervisory code appeared beside each entry. Jonathan studied the timestamps. The first alert occurred 72 hours ago, he said. The second appeared after a flight from Denver. The third reopened 11 minutes before boarding began today. Emma nodded. That is what the log shows. Karen reached toward the tablet again. You are sharing restricted operational information with a passenger. Emma pulled it closer to her chest. I am showing an active safety warning to someone who understands it. Robert's voice dropped. You are close to losing your position. Emma looked at him, and fear crossed her face, but she did not lower the screen. I may lose my position for reporting it. Passengers could lose far more if I ignore it. Miguel rose halfway from his seat. She is doing what the rest of you should have done. Karen turned toward him. Sit down immediately. Miguel remained where he was. He had a valid seat. You changed it. The warning was active. You closed it. Every time someone points to a fact, you call them disruptive. Murmurs spread through first class. Passengers who had avoided eye contact now watched openly. Meredith stepped into the aisle. This is ridiculous. I have an important meeting in New York, and I am not missing it because he wants attention. Jonathan finally looked at her. You assumed I wanted your seat because you never considered that it belonged to me. Now you assume I want attention because you cannot imagine that I understand the aircraft better than the crew defending you." Her jaw tightened. People like you always turn simple misunderstandings into accusations. The phrase struck the cabin with familiar ugliness. Karen did not correct her. Robert did not challenge her. Their silence made the insult part of the official response. Jonathan let 1 second pass. "You denied the evidence when it was a boarding pass," he said. "Now you are denying it when it is a safety alert. The pattern is not misunderstanding. The pattern is choosing what you want to believe." Emma's tablet sounded again. A second message appeared beneath the pressure warning. "Inspection required before release." She read it aloud. Robert moved closer. "That notice is automated. I can clear it from the cockpit." Jonathan's expression sharpened. "Without a licensed technician? I have command authority. Not authority to certify a system you did not inspect." The gate supervisor, still standing near the boarding door, touched the radio at his shoulder. "Captain, should I request maintenance?" Robert hesitated. That hesitation changed the room. It told every passenger that calling a technician should have been the first decision, not the last. Karen looked toward the clock above the galley. 12 minutes had passed since Jonathan entered the cabin. Boarding was complete, but the aircraft remained attached to the gate. Jonathan turned to Emma. "Can you access the fleet history attached to that override code?" She searched the menu. "Only the last 30 days. Open it." Robert stepped forward. "Do not do that." Emma stopped, her finger hovering over the screen. Jonathan looked at her. "The decision is yours." She drew a slow breath and selected the file. The list opened. The override had not been used 3 times. It had been used 47 times across 18 aircraft. Emma stared at the screen. "This is not one warning," she whispered. Jonathan's voice remained quiet. "No, it is a system." 47 overrides across 18 aircraft changed the silence into something heavier than fear. Emma scrolled slowly, each entry carrying a different flight number, a different date, and the same authorization pattern. Pressure sensor warnings. Hydraulic monitoring alerts. Cabin temperature reports. Each one marked deferred, closed, or cleared without a complete technician record. Robert's expression tightened as the list continued. "That file is incomplete," he said. "You are drawing conclusions from raw data." Jonathan looked at him. Raw data does not repeat itself 47 times by accident. Karen stepped closer to Emma. "Close the screen." Emma held the tablet against her chest. "Why?" "Because you are not qualified to interpret it." "Then call someone who is." The words surprised even Emma. Her voice was still quiet, but the fear inside it had found a direction. Miguel stood fully now, careful not to block the aisle. "That sounds reasonable." Meredith turned toward him with irritation. "Nobody asked for your opinion." Miguel looked at her. "Nobody asked you to take his seat either." A few passengers murmured in agreement. Meredith's face flushed. "My friend was promised that seat." Jonathan raised his boarding pass. "And I was assigned it. The difference is that my promise exists in the system." Karen looked toward the gate supervisor. "Remove him now. He is encouraging passengers to interfere with crew authority." Jonathan did not move. "You changed my record after boarding. You ignored an active inspection notice. Now you want the person asking questions removed before maintenance arrives." The gate supervisor hesitated. "Captain, I need a clear reason for removal." Robert's voice hardened. "Operational disruption." "He has remained calm," the supervisor replied. Robert looked at him sharply. "Are you challenging my command?" The supervisor lowered his radio but did not approach Jonathan. That refusal, small and silent, shifted the cabin again. Jonathan looked at the clock above the galley. 17 minutes had passed since he stepped on board. The aircraft remained at the gate, but the crew still seemed more concerned with preserving authority than verifying safety. He remembered another clock, another gate, another version of himself. 22 years old. A borrowed blazer. A business-class ticket purchased after months of saving. He had stood beside a counter while a white agent told him the seat assignment must be wrong. He remembered the embarrassment of stepping aside as strangers watched. He also remembered the flight returning to the gate because a warning light had been dismissed as a minor delay. That day taught him something no business school ever had. Bias did not stay in one lane. The same habit that dismissed a person could dismiss a warning. The memory faded, leaving the present sharper than before. Jonathan looked at Robert. "You are not protecting this flight." You are protecting the decisions that put it at risk. Robert stepped closer, lowering his voice. You have no idea what pressure this airline is under. Delays cost money. Ground inspections create cancellations. Sometimes experienced crews make practical decisions. Practical for whom? Jonathan asked. The passengers, or the quarterly report? Robert said nothing. Emma's tablet sounded again. A new alert appeared beneath the fleet history. Multiple aircraft require immediate technical review. The message came from the manufacturer-linked monitoring system, automatically triggered by the repeated override pattern. Emma read it aloud. The cabin reacted at once. Passengers began checking their phones, whispering about connections and safety. Karen tried to regain control. Everyone remained seated. This is being handled. Jonathan looked around the cabin. No, it has been hidden. Meredith folded her arms. You are enjoying this. Jonathan turned toward her. There is nothing enjoyable about discovering that prejudice and negligence share the same shortcut. Robert's confidence finally cracked. Who are you? Jonathan reached into his jacket and removed his phone. Someone who gave this airline every opportunity to follow the contract it signed. He selected one contact. Camille Brooks answered immediately. Jonathan. His eyes remained on Robert. Activate Protocol Atlas. Camille did not ask why. Protocol Atlas confirmed, she said. I am opening the fleet safety network now. Jonathan kept the phone near his ear while Robert watched him with growing unease. Karen looked toward the cockpit as a muted alert sounded through the aircraft systems. Emma's tablet refreshed. The 18 aircraft listed on her screen became 32, then 51, each connected by the same override code. The pattern is expanding, Emma said. Camille's voice remained calm. I have accessed the Reed Aerospace lease monitoring records. This airline currently operates 64 aircraft under our ownership agreements. 49 showed deferred technical alerts closed through unauthorized supervisory overrides. The cabin went still. Miguel stared toward the cockpit. 49 aircraft. Robert lifted his chin. Those records require context. Some alerts are administrative. Jonathan answered without raising his voice. Then the maintenance signatures should prove it. Camille typed in the background. They do not. 27 aircraft have missing technician approvals. 14 show repeated sensor warnings. 8 have maintenance entries submitted from employee accounts that were inactive at the time. Emma looked up from the tablet. Inactive accounts? Former employees, Camille replied. 2 left the company months ago. Karen's face tightened. This cannot be discussed in front of passengers. Jonathan turned toward her. Passengers were already placed inside the consequences. They deserve the truth. Meredith stood beside the empty seat with her arms folded, but the certainty had disappeared from her expression. You are making an entire airline sound unsafe because of a computer code. Jonathan looked at her. You dismissed a valid boarding pass because of the man holding it. They dismissed valid warnings because of the delays attached to them. The habit is the same. Robert stepped closer. End the call. You have no authority to access internal airline operations. Camille answered before Jonathan could. Reed Aerospace does not need permission to review the aircraft it owns. Robert froze. Karen stared at Jonathan. Emma lowered the tablet slowly as recognition began to form. Jonathan spoke into the phone. Camille, place every Reed-owned aircraft assigned to this carrier on temporary operational hold pending independent inspection. Camille paused only long enough to confirm the scope. That will affect most of today's schedule. Safety already affects every schedule, Jonathan said. Proceed. Robert's voice sharpened. You cannot remove an entire fleet from service based on preliminary data. Jonathan met his gaze. The lease agreement gives Reed Aerospace immediate withdrawal authority when maintenance records are falsified or required inspections cannot be verified. Camille returned. The holds are processing now. Asset control, legal counsel, independent safety review, and federal aviation oversight have received the evidence package. Across the cabin, passengers began checking airline applications on their phones. One screen showed a delayed departure. Another refreshed to canceled. Then another. A ripple of disbelief moved through the rows. Emma's tablet displayed a new message. Aircraft release suspended. She looked toward Jonathan. Who are you? Karen whispered. He did not answer yet. Camille continued. Operations Control is reporting widespread ground stops. The airline does not have enough cleared aircraft to maintain service. Robert's expression hardened into desperation. Jonathan, listen to me. We can resolve this without destroying the company. The use of his first name confirmed that recognition had finally arrived. Jonathan looked at the clock. 23 minutes had passed since Meredith told him the seat was not for him. The company was damaged before I boarded, he said. I am stopping it from carrying that damage into the sky. Meredith took a step back. You knew this would happen. No, Jonathan replied. I knew the truth would appear if someone finally refused to look away. Camille's voice came through once more. All Reed Aerospace aircraft assigned to the carrier are now grounded pending inspection. Senior leadership is requesting your identity confirmation for the emergency call. Jonathan lowered the phone and faced the cabin. Robert looked down. Karen stood motionless. Emma held the evidence they had tried to silence. Give them my confirmation, Jonathan said. Jonathan Reed, Chief Executive Officer of Reed Aerospace Holdings. The name moved through the cabin in stunned silence. Jonathan Reed, Chief Executive Officer of Reed Aerospace Holdings. The man Karen had treated like an intruder was the owner of the aircraft beneath her feet and the executive whose company controlled most of the airline's fleet. Emma looked from Jonathan to the small ownership plate near the front galley. The Reed Aerospace name had been there the entire time, printed in plain view. Robert's face lost the last of its authority. Mr. Reed, he began, but Jonathan stopped him with one calm look. You did not need my title when I showed you a valid boarding pass. Karen lowered her tablet. We did not know who you were. Jonathan turned toward her. That is not a defense. That is the reason this matters. Meredith remained beside seat 1A, staring at him as if his identity had somehow changed the facts. You should have introduced yourself, she said. This could have been avoided. Jonathan faced her. You could have looked at the ticket. Karen could have verified the seat. Captain Hayes could have called maintenance. At every step, someone chose assumption over evidence. Miguel nodded from across the aisle. He is right. Several passengers murmured agreement. Robert tried again. The override system was created to keep operations moving during irregular situations. It was never intended to hide safety problems. Jonathan looked at Emma's tablet. Intent does not erase 49 aircraft with unverified maintenance records. Camille's voice came through the phone. Jonathan, the emergency oversight call is active. The airline's chief operating officer, legal counsel, safety director, and federal liaison are listening. Robert glanced toward the cockpit. We can explain the records. You will, Jonathan said. Under oath, with the original logs preserved. Karen's tablet went dark in her hands. A second later, Robert's cockpit access badge flashed red against the panel beside the door. He stared at it. Camille continued. Captain Robert Hayes and lead flight attendant Karen Wallace have been placed on immediate administrative suspension. Safety Director Peter Lang has also been removed from operational authority pending investigation. Emma drew a breath. Peter Lang approved the override policy. His credentials appear on 31 of the deferred entries, Camille replied. The independent review team is securing the servers now. Meredith stepped into the aisle. This is becoming absurd. My meeting is in 2 hours. Jonathan looked at her with quiet disbelief. An entire fleet is grounded because safety records may have been falsified, and you are still measuring this by your schedule. Her expression hardened. I did not create those records. No, Jonathan said. You only revealed how easily this crew was willing to bend reality for the right person. The words struck harder than an accusation because everyone had witnessed them. Karen had accepted Meredith's claim without proof. Robert had supported Karen without checking the ticket. The same reflex had allowed warnings to disappear whenever they became inconvenient. Emma lifted her tablet. I saved the original event history before my access changed. Jonathan turned to her. Send it directly to the independent review team and keep a secure copy. Karen looked at Emma. You are betraying your crew. Emma met her eyes. A crew protects passengers. It does not protect altered records. The cabin fell quiet again. Jonathan glanced at the clock above the galley. 26 minutes had passed since Meredith blocked seat 1A. On passengers' phones, the airline application continued refreshing. Delayed became canceled. Boarding became suspended. Aircraft across the country were being held at gates as inspection orders reached operations teams. Camille spoke once more. The carrier has issued a system-wide ground stop. No aircraft will depart until the review determines which planes are safe. Jonathan looked around the cabin, then began deplaning calmly. Rebook every passenger at no cost. Cover meals, hotels, and missed connections. Robert stared at him. You are protecting the people who just watched this happen. Jonathan's answer was immediate. They are passengers. That was always the job. The deplaning announcement sounded through the cabin, calm and formal, but no one moved at first. Passengers remained seated, staring at their phones as cancellations spread across the airline's network. Flights in Chicago, Dallas, Atlanta, Seattle, and Los Angeles shifted from boarding to delayed, then from delayed to canceled. Gate agents across the country were receiving the same instruction. Hold every aircraft connected to the Reed Aerospace fleet until inspection teams completed their review. Inside Jonathan's cabin, the scale of what had happened finally became visible. Miguel turned his phone toward the aisle. They have grounded the entire airline, he said. Karen looked at Robert, but he had no answer. His cockpit access remained disabled, and the authority he had carried into the cabin now existed only in memory. Emma stood near the galley with the original override history secured on her tablet. Camille's voice came through Jonathan's phone. The carrier has confirmed a complete operational shutdown. 64 aircraft are unavailable. The remaining planes cannot support the schedule, so all departures are suspended. Jonathan looked at the clock. 28 minutes had passed since Meredith told him seat 1A was not for him. No one in the cabin spoke. The timing felt impossible, yet every step had been recorded. 1 denied seat. 1 altered manifest. 1 reopened warning. 49 aircraft with questionable maintenance records. An entire airline stopped before another plane could leave the ground. Meredith stared at the cancellation notice on her phone. This cannot be happening because of me, she said. Jonathan turned toward her. It is not happening because of you alone. She looked almost relieved until he continued. It is happening because too many people believed status was more reliable than evidence. Karen stepped forward. Mr. Reed, I understand how this looks, but I was following the captain's direction. Emma met her eyes. You changed the seat before he gave that direction. Karen fell silent. Robert tried to recover what remained of his professional composure. The maintenance program existed before this flight. I did not create the policy. Jonathan nodded. But you used it. You saw an active warning and chose departure over inspection. Then you saw a black passenger with a valid ticket and chose suspicion over verification. Both decisions came from the same habit. The gate supervisor opened the boarding door wider as airport operations personnel arrived to assist passengers. Jonathan gave one instruction. Families with children first. Then passengers with medical needs. Then everyone else by row. Keep it orderly. The supervisor nodded and began guiding people toward the jet bridge. As passengers stood, frustration gave way to something more complicated. A woman in row 3 approached Emma. Thank you for speaking up, she said. A businessman who had watched silently added, You may have protected all of us. Emma lowered her eyes, overwhelmed. Jonathan stepped beside her. Do not confuse fear with weakness, he said quietly. You acted while fear was still present. That is courage. Miguel paused at the door. Mr. Reed, will the airline survive this? Jonathan looked through the windows at the aircraft parked along the terminal, each one waiting beneath the same uncertainty. That depends on whether it values truth more than its image. Meredith remained beside the empty seat until an airport representative asked her to leave. She looked at Jonathan one last time. You could have let me keep the seat. Jonathan held her gaze. And you could have moved when the ticket proved it was mine. She said nothing. As she stepped onto the jet bridge, the seat beside her remained untouched. Karen and Robert were escorted towards separate interview rooms, while Emma transferred the files to the independent review team. Across the terminal, departure boards filled with red cancellation notices. The airline had not been grounded by one angry executive. It had been grounded by records, evidence, and a system that finally could not outrun the truth. The cabin stood nearly empty beneath the soft evening light, its silence carrying more weight than the arguments that had filled it minutes earlier. Seat 1A remained untouched. Jonathan stood beside it with his boarding pass still in hand, the same small piece of paper everyone had refused to believe until his title forced them to listen. Outside the windows, aircraft lined the terminal without moving. Ground crews waited beside service vehicles. Departure boards across the airport glowed red with cancellations, but no engines turned and no plane pushed back. Emma returned from the jet bridge after transferring the original records to the independent safety team. They confirmed receipt, she said. The files are locked, and no one inside the airline can alter them. Jonathan nodded. Good. She looked toward the cockpit, where Robert's access badge had been removed, then toward the galley where Karen's tablet sat dark. I keep thinking about how close I came to saying nothing. Jonathan folded the boarding pass once, carefully. Systems survive because good people convince themselves silence is temporary. Emma lowered her eyes. I was afraid. You were supposed to be, he said. Fear is how broken systems teach people to protect them. You chose truth anyway. Miguel stood near the boarding door, waiting for a hotel voucher from the gate supervisor. Mr. Reed, he said, people out there are angry. Some of them do not understand why every flight had to stop. Jonathan looked through the open door toward the crowded terminal. They deserve an explanation. He stepped onto the jet bridge, where dozens of passengers waited beneath bright airport lights. Some held phones. Others clutched carry-on bags and rebooking papers. Their frustration softened when Jonathan appeared. He did not stand above them. He stood among them. I know this shutdown has disrupted plans, separated families, and created costs you did not expect, he said. Those costs will be covered. But no schedule is worth placing passengers inside aircraft whose safety records cannot be trusted. A man near the front asked, Did all of this really start over a first-class seat? Jonathan looked back toward the cabin. It started with judgment. The terminal quieted around him. A passenger saw a black man and decided the seat could not belong to him. A flight attendant saw the same man and decided his ticket needed less respect than someone else's preference. A captain saw a warning and decided the truth could wait because delay was inconvenient. Different moments. Same habit. Meredith stood farther down the jet bridge beside an airport representative. She heard every word but did not look up. Jonathan continued. This did not begin with a broken aircraft. It began with broken judgment. The same people who ignored a valid ticket had also learned to ignore valid safety warnings. When evidence became inconvenient, they changed the record instead of changing their decision. Emma stepped into view behind him, holding the tablet that had preserved the truth. Passengers looked at her with recognition. Jonathan turned slightly toward her. One person refused to erase what she saw. That choice protected more people than she may ever know. A quiet wave of gratitude moved through the crowd. Jonathan faced them again. The airline was not grounded because I was denied a seat. It was grounded because safety had already been grounded long before I arrived. Beyond the terminal glass, the motionless fleet reflected the sunset. Jonathan unfolded his boarding pass and looked at seat 1A printed across the top. They believed dignity needed approval, he said. They believed truth could be reassigned. 28 minutes later, the entire system had to answer for both. He handed the pass to the independent investigator approaching from the gate, then walked toward the terminal without applause, celebration, or anger. Behind him, the planes remained still. For the first time in years, the truth had moved faster than the airline.